Good evening and welcome to the Lower Makefield Planning Commission April 5th, 2021 meeting. Our first order of business is call to order, and all members are present this evening. First item that we have is our next item, I should say, is the approval of the minutes from our March 8th meeting. Does anyone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from last.
Is there a second?
A second.
Any comments, deletions, changes to the minutes? Seeing none, hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Next up, we have the Prickett Preserve at Edgewood Sewage Facilities Planning Module component.
Bill, you have to unmute.
Bill, you're here on behalf of Prickett Preserve?
I am. I was also expecting the rest of my crew to be with me as well this evening. Is Vince or Steve Harris on?
No.
Okay.
Do you want to wait for them? And that means we'll push you back and get to somebody else, or do you want to just proceed?
I mean, Fred is on. I mean, I'm willing to proceed. I mean, we've submitted a planning module. It has been reviewed by Fred. It's my understanding it has been revised and resubmitted. That revision is either been reviewed or under review by Fred. If there are any comments, I know that we are basically in a will comply position at this point. Beyond that, we're ready to move it forward so that we can get the planning module completed and submitted to the Board of Supervisors for ultimately for approval and to DEP.
So can I ask a question? What was circulated to everybody for tonight's meeting was the Act 537 planning module dated October 20th, 2020. Are you saying there's an updated version that should have been, that we...
Here.
Oh, there's Steve Harris.
Yeah, I'm here, but I'm not seeing you guys right at the moment.
Well,
But-
I can see your pretty face, Steve.
Well, thank you, Barbara, but it would be a pleasure to see yours.
The question was, is there an updated planning module dated later than October 20th, 2020?
The answer is yes. This is Fred. The latest one is dated March 22nd, 2021. And I can just give the board an overview of why a planning module is required and really what this one states. The project is located in the existing public sanitary sewer service area to be serviced through the Neshaminy Interceptor by Bucks County Water and Sewer Authority. There are three reasons that a planning module is required for this project. The first reason is that it proposes more than 250 EDUs. It actually proposes 427 EDUs. So that the flows alone trigger a planning module. The second reason is that it requires a water quality management permit for the construction of a pump station. They are proposing a pump station that will be dedicated to the township, which would be an asset that would be sold to Aqua, Pennsylvania. The third reason is that there is a connection management plan that allocates EDUs to the Neshaminy Interceptor for every township based upon our compliance with the corrective action plan. In this case, the EDUs have been recommended for release by Bucks County Water and Sewer Authority based upon Lower Makefield Township's compliance with our corrective action plan. What this board is charged with is completing component 4A, which is the municipal planning module component for the planning module. It's required to be, the planning module is required to be reviewed by the Township Planning Commission, County Planning Commission, County Health Department, and then there will also be capacity certifications that are required for all of the downstream conveyance as well as treatment. Where we're at in the process is it's now appropriate for review by this planning commission for compliance and completing component 4A. Jim Majewski has completed draft comments for that based on a November or September 14th, 2020 planning module that was dated, and he completed his review on November 9th of 2020. The aspects of the planning module that relate to the Township Planning Commission have not changed. They've added additional details. They're going through outside agency. So I believe what the applicant is looking for is for you to confirm Jim's completion of the November 9th, 2020 component 4A, and then for the applicant to answer any questions that the Planning Commission may have for them. So Bill, Steve, and Tom, if that's a adequate introduction, I will turn it back over to you to take any questions that the Planning Commission may have on your application.
That's a very complete explanation. And if the Planning Commission has any questions, we're here to answer them. Otherwise, we'd request a motion to affirm Jim Majewski's action and move the planning module onto the Board of Supervisors. Of course, they'll need the certifications from the Bucks County, et cetera, before they can act on it. But we would request that you approve it and move on.
Jim, before we go on, I don't know that I saw what's been referred to as 4A that you filled out last November. Is it possible for you to share that on the screen with us?
Yes, that'll just take me 1 minute.
I don't know if the other planning commission members saw it, but I don't think I
I
saw it.
remember seeing it.
You just bear with me 1 minute. I have two computers running slowly, battling to see which one goes slower. I apologize.
While we wait for Jim, does anybody have any other questions given what we've heard so far?
No, but just to clarify what I think was heard, nothing has changed from essentially from what we've already approved in the overall plan, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Thanks.
With respect to your aspect of it, there's other technical items, but with respect to what the Planning Commission's purview is, that's correct. There are other things, and it will continue to be revised right up until the point that it's ready for the Board of Supervisors.
Fred, you had mentioned that there was a water pumping station that would be built and then conveyed to the township and sold to Aqua.
That is correct. The wastewater pumping station.
Yeah, where is that being constructed?
Basically at the main entrance as you come in on the right.
Okay.
And one of the things that we're going to be reviewing as part of the review comments of the on the design of the pump station is the aesthetics of that. That it not only matches the development, but that it is, meets the township standards, just being that it's in a fairly prominent location.
And what sort of, if you know, how much do you think that the town would sell that to Aqua for?
It's part of the overall sale of assets. I mean, the cost of the pump station is probably, $600,000 in construction costs. And that was part of the assets that were already purchased. It was known when the Aqua purchased the public sewer system, this was a known coming asset to them.
Okay, because I don't think it was on the plans that we had seen when this was before the planning commission before.
I disclosed it as well as the potential customers. I obviously did not represent that it was a definite deal that was done because the township had not offered final plan approval on these at the stage when we were going through the sale. So it was prospective in nature, but it is included on the asset list that we're going over now. It's probably actually a detriment when you buy a sewer system. The customers are the asset. A pumping station is more of a liability that they assume to accept the additional customers.
No, I understand that. I was commenting more on the fact that it wasn't on the plans that we saw from a planning perspective.
It is shown on the land development plan.
Correct.
And Bill, maybe you could explain a little better than I can exactly where it is, because I laser focus in on the actual pump station rather than the general description.
So Jim has his 4A on the screen. At some point, if you want, I can share it. But from a location standpoint, if you look at the main driveway that accesses the development, which is the new signalized intersection, which is opposite Shady Brook's existing driveway, as soon as you come in, here, I'll share my screen. It'll be easier to see. So this is the main intersection. Commercials to the left, residential's to the right. The pump station sits in the front right corner as you enter the property, between the first apartment building and Stony Hill Road.
And obviously it'd be very important for the developers to make sure that that's aesthetically pleasing, that it's properly landscaped, and that it is an asset to the overall project. You wouldn't want to drive in off the road and see something that didn't fit in and, wasn't a real an asset. It's one of the things, and of course, sort of got to be at the bottom of the hill.
Thank you.
Yeah, you see before you component 4A that I started to fill out. And basically there are a number of questions that are contained on that. And the answers you can see on your screen. The first one is there a municipal comprehensive plan adopted under the municipality's planning code? And the answer is yes. Is this proposal consistent with the comprehensive plan for land use? And that is a yes. Is this proposal consistent with the use, development, and protection of water resources? That is a yes. Is this proposal consistent with municipal land use planning relative to prime agricultural land preservation? That is yes. Does this project propose encroachments, obstructions, or dams that will affect wetlands? That is no, there are no wetlands on the site. Will any known historical or archaeological resources be impacted by this project? And the answer to that is yes, there is proposed work to be conducted near the historic house, and the applicant has done a phase 1 archaeological, and I believe they're also in the process of doing a phase 2 archaeological study for that.
That's correct.
Number 7, will any known endangered or threatened species of plant or animal be impacted by this project? That is a no. Is there a municipal zoning ordinance? That is a yes. Is this proposal consistent with the ordinance? That is a yes. And does the proposal require a change or variance to an existing comprehensive plan or zoning ordinance? The answer to that is no. And then, is this proposal consistent with the ordinance? That is a yes. And is this plan consistent with the municipal official sewage facilities plan? And that is a yes. Are there any wastewater disposal needs in the area adjacent to this proposal that should be considered by a municipality? And that is no. The adjoining property of the Lower Makefield Corporate Center North Campus or Makefield Crossing North already has sewer. And then the last one is, has a waiver of the planning requirements been requested for the residual tract of this subdivision? And that is a no. Does anyone have any questions?
Jim, is this based on the October 2020 document that was submitted? And I think you were just saying that there was a March one that was submitted. Is there any differences between the two?
No, and this actually was based on that planning module and also the plans that have been around for quite some time. There have been no variances required for this project. It is consistent with our comprehensive plan, with our zoning ordinances, and all of the answers are as I had outlined. And that's regardless if it was the original submission or any subsequent revision to address the technical items that Fred Ebert noticed in other parts of the application. Also, to let everyone know, this was publicly advertised in the newspaper and on our website that the planning modules were available for review by the general public. And over the last 30 days, we have received no comments from the general public in regard to the sewage facilities planning module.
Anyone else have any questions or comments? Does anyone want to make a motion?
There is public comment on this.
Oh, I'm sorry. Apologize about that. Could you bring them in?
We are bringing in Christina now.
Yes.
Christina, you can hit *6 to unmute.
Hello, my name is Christina Davis. I'm a constituent. I live in Lower Makefield on Queens Drive. And I'm wondering if there's been any consideration of the number of empty storefronts. Actually, before I get to that, I just want to share this experience. This is my first time doing this as a remote viewer. And I just want to say this is a public hearing. The group assembled as if it was more like a private business meeting. There weren't any introductions and there wasn't any real context at the top of the meeting. So I'd like to provide that feedback just to try and make this a little more accessible for the public and a little easier for citizens to participate in. First off. So yeah, I think that you should start these by introducing yourselves, or there should be a lower third graphic that tells me who is speaking, and there should be some context. Secondarily, I'm wondering you've considered the number of empty storefronts and businesses that have gone out all over our community, and why we would be adding more inventory for retail in an environment that is already struggling, especially due to the recent economic situation. I'm concerned about the strain on our local infrastructure, which over the long term appears to require more funding from taxpayers. There's also going to be more school taxes down the road because we're going to bring in a lot of residential households into a small space. And there's no way that the apartment rents are going to pay for the kind of taxes that it'll take to educate the children. And as it is, our schools are struggling to update in order to be ready for a post-COVID world. So what are you doing to address these concerns?
Christina, your first issue that you raised, I appreciate the fact that perhaps we could structure the beginning of the meeting slightly differently. As for the substantive points that you've raised, tonight we're simply here about the sewage facilities planning module. The rest of this project has already been before this board and has moved on to the Board of Supervisors. If you have additional comments or want to raise them, that is the more appropriate forum at this point.
So there's no consideration of how things have evolved in our community?
Well, we've already been through that path, down that path. We've probably had 6 or 7 meetings on this project and discussed many of the issues that you raised. This board approved the plan or recommended approval of it to the Board of Supervisors, and it is before them at this point.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, I'm not saying that you're raising. I'm not commenting on the validity or invalidity of your points. Simply saying we're not the right board at this moment.
Yeah. Well, just let it be known that as a taxpayer, I find this plan very unfounded. As a taxpayer, I feel that the board of that the township is using us as a cash machine to take care of special interests and corporate interests and line the pockets of people who aren't deeply connected to this community and will just take money away from us and from taxpayers. So since I get an opportunity to comment, that's my comment. And I understand that there's been plenty of public outcry about this that has fallen on deaf ears.
I think the plans have changed in response to some of the public comment, but your concerns, if you still have them, should be addressed with the supervisors.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
No further public comment.
Okay. At this time, is there anyone that would like to make a motion?
Would the motion be just approve the writing of component 4A as part of the planning module?
I believe that's all that's required of us, I think.
Oh, can I just ask a question about the pumping station of the Prickett people? Is that something that normally would be put where this is proposed being placed, or is it just by virtue of it being?
Barbara, it is for 2 reasons. First, they have to be accessible. But more importantly, as we all know, sewage still runs downhill. And so this is the natural place to collect the sewage from both the residential and commercial location and then pump it on to the interceptor. So it's both an issue of access, but more importantly, just an issue of geography.
Thanks.
Is there a second on the motion?
I'll second it.
Okay. Any further discussion? Call a question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your continued consideration of this matter. And we'll exit stage right and let you carry on with your meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm also going to leave unless you guys have any other wastewater questions for me.
I don't believe so.
All right. Thank you, guys. See ya.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I should have said thank you to Fred for his very good introduction on the sewage facility planning modules and what the actions are that needed to be taken tonight.
Our next item on the agenda is a informal sketch plan for the Point property.
Hey guys, good evening.
Hi, Ed.
So I'll take a cue from the prior comment, and I'm Ed Murphy. I'm here tonight with CT Troilo. CT and I are representing the interest of the Troilo family in connection with a oddly configured property that probably everybody is very familiar with, having probably all driven by it hundreds, if not thousands of times. And as further context, probably only Tony and Jim would know about the long history of interest, argument, contention, you name it. It's probably all been the subject this property has been the subject of all of that. And over the years, there have been various proposals made by owners prior to Cam Troilo and presently for what would happen to the two existing freestanding buildings that currently sit on the property. One right at the point of Edgewood and Langhorne Yardley Road, and the other building behind it, that building more commonly known as the Danny Quill House. About 6 months ago, I had a series, and Cam and CT had a series of conversations with the staff about the property generally and what to do. And as an outgrowth of those conversations, it was suggested that maybe an alternate plan to extend and replicate the village of Edgewood might be something that would be considered for the first time. So Cam and CT got together with their architect and prepared a plan, and CT went to HARB in the last, 6 weeks, CT, 8 weeks, something like that, 4 weeks, and presented the plan, which CT is going to go over with you tonight to gauge your initial reaction to it before any further steps were taken. Candidly, if HARB, I was not there, so I'll let CT describe what HARB's reaction was, but it was sufficiently encouraging to take the next step. I'll say that. But everyone's reluctant to take too many more steps until we validate the idea with the Planning Commission and ultimately Board of Supervisors. So the point of tonight would be to permit CT to sort of provide a descriptive overview of the plan and gauge your reaction to it before anything else happens. CT, you want to unmute yourself? And
I have it set up for the space bar. So I hope it's working.
Yep. Well, it was.
Yeah. Okay, we're good.
Okay.
So I'll give you a little history of how we got to the point of the plan that we're going to present. Actually, I've been going to the hard board probably for 4 months, 5 months now, for both Zoom meetings and we've had some other email reviews. So the first plan was to just do something simple and hopefully make it streamlined and just get something through and an action. And for a long time, we've been asking to take the Quill House down, renovate the stone house, and call it a day. And that's what we went to the heart with about. Doing a simple gravel lot, taking the Quill House down, renovate the stone house.
Now, where Jim is pointing, where he's pointing now with the cursor, that's what CT refers to as the stone house at the corner. The building behind it that Jim first highlighted there is the Danny Quill House.
Correct. The Harb was not very favorable towards that. They suggested having the Quill House or maybe reproducing the Quill House, adding a couple other buildings. So we had we changed the plan, reproducing the Quill House, moving the Quill House, adding some other residential structures, and again, rehabbing the stone house on the corner for commercial. All our plans are steady with that. They all include rehabbing the stone house on the point for a commercial ice cream stand or something along those lines, small retail establishment. So after further discussions with the Harb Board, they stressed that they really would like to keep the Quill House, renovate the Quill House, and renovate the stone house. And that perhaps if we could find a way to do that, they'd look favorably on adding some more residential units to the property and proceeding down that path. So this is actual version 12 of that path. And on it, we have the stone house renovated. The Quill House, which is actually a duplex, is renovated. We have a block of 5 units that are composed of 2 apartments in each unit, an upper and a lower, and then a new building located next to the Quill House with 4 units, again, 2 in each unit. So we presented this to the Harb, and they like the concept. The biggest concern is the 5 units along Langhorne Yardley Road. Some of the board members were concerned that it looks a little row housey and not in keeping with the village. So this is, we're not saying that the Harb approves this because they do have some reservations, but they liked the scale. There were a lot of things they liked about it. And so obviously conversations are going to need to continue with them. But it was also suggested that we've been working on it about 6 months. It would be a good time to bring it up in front of the planning board and let people know what we were thinking about and just make sure that that everyone's kind of thinking along the same lines before we go too much further.
What about architecturally, CT? You want to talk a little bit about that?
Certainly. I think, Jim, do you have that architectural perspective?
If our tech guys could bring up some of those photographs, we could take a look at what they were proposing.
Right.
And it's in keeping with the village and some of the other things we have done there in Edgewood. And as you can see, we're very aware of the scale to make it not the piece on the point. It's a little fuzzy. Is the existing stone structure? So as you can see, that the heights are consistent with the village. And again, we haven't gone too far on the architectural detail. This was just to give the board something to look at. And again, the concern is that the 5 units in a row like that presents more as a row house as opposed to buildings with additions and something along those lines. So that's pretty much where we're at. And again, there's been no engineering done. There's been none of that. It's just a basic sketch plan right now for conversation's sake.
Jim Majewski, I have a question for you. With regard to the new buildings, proposed new buildings, aren't those pretty much controlled by what's in the traditional neighborhood development ordinance as opposed to something that the HARB would say?
Well, the traditional neighborhood development ordinance requires that buildings get HARB approval or recommendation from HARB that they're consistent with the overall look of the Edgewood Village and the Edgewood Village design guidelines. So for instance, the Flowers Field project, all of those individual homes, after the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors approved the land development plan, needed to go in front of HARB, and HARB reviewed them and offered their comments on stuff like the windows, the doors, the overhangs, just to see that it was what they felt was consistent with a look that would fit in with the village.
I thank you. I had forgotten that, but for the planning board members who aren't familiar with the traditional neighborhood overlay development ordinance, it is really detailed in terms of what these buildings can look like.
Correct.
And if somebody's complying with those, HARB may tinker around the edges, but there's not a lot more they're going to do with it beyond that for the new buildings.
And I should add to what CT said that they were kind of inclined towards being somewhat in favor of the plans. It's just the actual renderings of the building they thought fell a little bit short, and they gave Mr. Trillo a bunch of comments and a bunch of ideas to work with that hopefully he's or will be going with his architect over, just to try to come up with something that is like fitting in just a little bit better.
Jim, do you have the image of the restored point building that I've seen that, and I know it's part of the township file. Do you have an image of that, a colored rendering of that? Because I think that's far more representative of, I think that is the one building that would be the most prominent that I thought everybody sort of liked the scale and what was going to happen there, where they're talking about a very small, like ice cream or small retail shop. Do you have that one, Jim?
Yeah, I have to find that here.
Ed, is that the one where there's like a little porch with a railing at the front door?
Yes.
Yes. That was circulated too.
Okay, good.
Yes.
So it was that one, and then there was.
I think that one was the most fully developed of all of the sketches of the other buildings. That's why I thought that might be a good one to show everybody. So.
And that would be the one that's the corner, right? The Ishmael house?
Right. The one right at the point, Barb. Yep.
Okay.
And I know architecturally they do have a ways to go on their plans, but it's time for the Planning Commission to weigh in on what they think of the general layout of like the driveways, the road, the parking, the buildings, and how you guys feel on some of that. Do you have any ideas for ways that maybe could be altered to be improved?
And Jim, would you go back and put the sketch plan itself on the screen? And I want to make one comment about that for the benefit of some of the folks that may not be familiar with past history. That is actually relevant. If you look at that plan, you don't see any visual label or description of any stormwater management. That is intentional because years ago, when one of the various prior developed plans that never got approved or built for this site was developed, it was anticipated that this site and the one next to it would be, the stormwater would be handled via a off-site stormwater line that would go and discharge into the basin next to the CVS, sort of in the northeast direction from this site. So that basin has already been built and sized to accommodate the bulk of the stormwater that would emanate from this site. Now, Jim has said, and I think correctly so, that there may need to be some supplemental stormwater underneath the parking areas here. But the reason why you don't see any at grade or more larger area devoted to stormwater is that reason. So it frees up the site a little bit to be a little more flexible with it. So
can I ask a quick question? Would the existing two buildings that are on this triangular lot be removed, demolished?
no, they'd be renovated and restored, both.
Okay.
And that's basically why
That's why Harb likes it now, because we're going to clean up both.
I just was confused because when I'm looking at this thing, it says the new 2-story building with 4 units, and then the other building. I just wanted to make sure that it was going to be added to everything.
That is correct. Both the the Quill house in the back and the Ishmael house in the front would be retained and restored and repopulated. Right.
Will they both be commercial use?
No.
Okay.
The Ishmael house on the corner, the current thinking is it would be right now an ice cream shop on the first floor, and the Quill house would be restored for, I think, CT said 2 residential units.
Correct. It's currently a duplex now, so it'd be
Right.
just restored to its current configuration.
I guess my only comment would be, is there enough parking? I think there's about 25 spots, and it seems like you'll have probably, looks like about 16 units, residential units.
We haven't done any analysis at all. This is just a bare bone sketch plan to feel the board out. So we can't really answer that question right now.
So I guess, for residential spaces required is 2.5 spaces per dwelling unit. And then for any commercial, like a restaurant, which I would consider the ice cream, I think that's 1 space per 50 square feet. So, and this sketch plan that we're looking at is different than what was distributed to us. It's a little different. There's a couple of spaces over by the Quill house that were not shown on ours. But in measuring the actual size of the parking spaces on our plan, those parking spaces are 7 feet by 14 feet, which is somewhat smaller than the required parking space. So I just want to throw that out there, that I'm not sure if these parking spaces that I'm looking at on the screen are 7 by 14 or if they were drawn to 9 by 18 or 10 by 20. But you might find that you have significantly less parking than, or space for significantly less parking than what is shown.
It's possible they just screwed up the scale bar.
Could be. I measured it at 1 inch equals 20 feet, but yeah.
Well, Andy, we'll take a look at that. Obviously, I don't think we're going to propose spaces smaller than 9 by 18. So,
right. Okay.
I have a couple of questions that sort of point to the same thing, I think. And again, this is just for discussion. So I'll throw my thoughts out there when I was looking at it. First question I have is your sort of mindset, I guess, with those 5 units are pretty close to the road, right? Just like Di Lorenzo's is pretty close to the road. Is your envisioning sort of like it's consistent with, in terms of spacing and a sidewalk across in front, the same way Di Lorenzo's is?
CT, you should answer that.
To tell you the truth, we haven't even thought it that far through. We've been so focused on fitting the units in there and the drive lane and the driveways and the parking. We haven't even gotten to any details like that
Okay.
But I think Adrian's comment, though, is right, that I think the idea is to extend the village and, yes, to put the building fronts as close to the road with parking behind. So the concept would be the same as you see with Di Lorenzo. So I think the answer is yes to that question. The details haven't got there, but yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I mean,
that's right. That's what I was picturing in my head.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure I was on the same page as what I saw what you guys put together.
Yeah.
I guess the only real thing, and I'm sure that you guys have probably already thought about this, but that intersection's already kind of a little bit of a nightmare because of where that house, Ishmael house is on the corner right there. Visibility's not that great. And now all we're going to do, I don't think these new units would do anything to visibility, but it's certainly going to add more traffic and a bigger pedestrian element to that intersection. And
that is correct. And everybody is mindful of that. The other thought, the counterbalance to that is if we create more opportunity for pedestrian traffic by being able to go back and forth, it would in and of itself also serve as some sort of traffic control and slowdown in the area. So more people, we think, probably would serve to help as a governor to that kind of traffic there in terms of the speed in which they travel through that area.
I'm going to throw this out there because the first thing I saw in this, like what I saw just in the basics, it doesn't look that inconsistent with me. What else, the other things that we've already been doing in that general area anyway in the last 10 years.
Right.
So that nothing really stood out to me there. I guess I'm looking at this more as a resident and somebody who just doesn't really like driving in that area anyway. This is probably more a question for, I guess, Jim and Andy and others as much as it is for you guys. Is there been any thought as to just taking that whole parcel, including that section of Yardley Langhorne Road, and just trying to redirect traffic a different way so it's not between that Ishmael house and the house across the street so tight, and you can wrap it around the other way and then let you develop where the road is currently today, somewhere where you just if you're developing over there, is there a way we can redo a bad situation that's already there?
That is something that's been talked about over time. A number of years ago, our prior traffic engineer actually looked at a scenario where they brought Edgewood Road and sort of curved it around the houses to come out to Langhorne Yardley Road. The problem with that scenario is it was like a several $100,000 proposition to do that.
And like I said, I guess we're not getting into the nuts and bolts, just conceptually, you understand what I'm saying? Like if you just cut off that piece of Yardley Langhorne and just brought Yardley Langhorne into Edgewood Road closer to the entrance to Giant.
And Adrian, I've seen a sketch years ago that did the same thing, only shut off Edgewood.
Yeah, okay.
I've seen your prior township engineer come up with a sketch that dead-ended Edgewood that didn't permit access to Langhorne Yardley from Edgewood anymore. Okay. So
all right, Jane. I guess that's why I'm just kind of, I'm not an expert in any of this stuff, so I'm just throwing it out there. Like that's the biggest thing to me that stood out that could be like a real roadblock to the traffic commission and then the planning commission is the whole pedestrian and traffic aspect to this. And it's really primarily driven by the house that is current, those two houses that make Yardley Langhorne Road so tight in that area. It's we're limited right now with what we're able to do with that orientation. And that I just thought I'd just raise the question of, is there a way to do it, just rethink it differently to avoid those potential issues in the future?
Yep.
I'm going to piggyback off of Adrian's comments there and ask, has there been any consideration to put the entrance at what we're looking at right now, the top corner of Langhorne Yardley Road instead of along Edgewood Road? You won't, making it theoretically more pedestrian friendly to go from this development to the shops to the bottom of where we're looking at this picture you won't change any of the traffic on Edgewood Road, but at least the traffic on Langhorne Yardley Road wouldn't turn right to make a left into this and would continue up Langhorne Yardley Road and turn into this development at the top of the screen, thus possibly reducing some of the traffic. Just you maybe did choose your reasons for putting the entrance there, and maybe that's just the most convenient and logical, but just again, playing off of Adrian's comments, which I thought were good.
Alternatively, any thought to relocating the house on the corner?
Yes.
That apparently is a huge inviolate no-no.
Okay. Got it.
But I'm glad you said it instead of us all the time.
Yeah, because I mean, I'll say it, and if somebody, I mean,
now we're going to put you in effigy in the square at Edgewood, so instead of us. But that obviously is a logical thought, Adrian, that all of us over the years have had, but apparently that's would be a significant issue for removing context of the village and how buildings were originally positioned. But I know Ross's comment about accessing up top, I know I hadn't thought about that, but it sort of makes sense. Maybe it's worth taking a look at that. So
my only other question was, have you spoken with the chapel next door? Have they had any comments, any reactions?
Not that I'm aware of. We haven't directly spoken with them. I don't know if they're aware of it or not.
I like Ross's suggestion as well with changing the entrance. That corner is a bad corner. But one other sort of question / more of a comment. I know you don't know who tenants might be, but you're talking about a ice cream location for that corner house. And looking at the sketch, there's 6 spots there. For 7 months a year, that's probably fine. For 5 months a year, maybe 4 months a year, that's probably problematic.
Go look at Yardley Ice House.
Yeah. I mean, there is parking across the street theoretically, but it could be a problem for 5 months a year, 4 or 5 months a year.
Fair point.
And if I may, Tony, looking at this and piggybacking on Ross's comment about coming out to Yardley Langhorne Road, just looking at it off the top of my head, maybe it's possible to take all of that parking and move it all to the right side or the west side of the property and have a driveway come in off of Edgewood Road where the new duplex building is proposed and have a whole bank of parking all the way down to the exit out on Yardley Langhorne Road. So you have one entrance over on Edgewood Road where that proposed new building's going, parking on both sides leading down all the way to the end, and then the driveway coming back out on the Langhorne Yardley. And then you can move those 4 units to 2 duplexes with upstairs, downstairs. That's to the right of the Quill House, to move it to be between the Ishmael House and the Quill House, and sort of create a cluster of residential, and on the right side have all parking.
And maybe on the Edgewood Road, if you had one, Jim, it might be right out only. So to avoid conflict coming the other way up at Langhorne Yardley, just give it a relief valve for people wanting to go that way. Having access on Edgewood Road, but right out only. People headed east on Edgewood, don't make a left out to Langhorne Yardley.
Out of the picture that we're looking at to the right, there is a parking lot next to Veterans Square. Is that owned by who? Is that owned by the chapel, or is that township property? And I ask because of Tony's point about overflow parking. Some of it could end up in the giant parking lot. Some of it could end up there because it's a logical place for it's a near location that cars will find, and then people will walk across the chapel grounds to access the stores if there is a need for overflow.
I think that Veterans Square is obviously owned by the township, I believe, right, Jim? The entire.
Yes.
I just wasn't sure if the parking lot was associated with Veterans. I'm looking on an old Google Maps, so that's why. But that makes sense.
That's where you park with the farmer's market.
Right.
Yeah, we had even had a brief discussion about maybe if they don't have enough parking, they could improve some of the spaces in Veterans Square by paving it, and then the township benefits from that. And for when they need them for overflow, they have parking in a short walk down to their site. And then when the township needs it for events, we have nicer paved parking than the stone parking that we have.
And a sidewalk between the two. I know in our last session we talked about sidewalks and I felt very differently about it, but in this one it would make a lot of sense.
I hope that, in the plans, and to piggyback on Ross's time, is this whole thing has to have sidewalks built in.
Correct.
With the residences so close to the street, and you have retail establishments on both sides of the street and everything, and we're talking about parking remotely and everything. I think grocery stores nearby. I think there's going to have to be a pedestrian flow plan to this thing.
Yep, agreed.
Ross, that parking lot you're talking about, there was a proposal at one point to make that a municipal parking lot and make it an improved municipal parking lot when the TND development was approved. That was actually contemplated, not included. I was in favor of including it at the time. It's needed as development happens in that area.
That's fair. So I guess in summary, I'm not opposed to the concept of this. I think based on what else we've done in that area, but I think
there it is. Yeah,
there we go. I think we've all, at least I made clear and others have made clear, that there's definitely some traffic and pedestrian flow, and I guess parking questions that need a lot of work to look at. And I'm sure you know that better than I do.
Yep. But I think that's the image that's probably most representative of what the quality and exterior treatment is going to look like. That's the one, I think, CT, that's been the most thought out, with more detail and fenestration and shutters and lighting and all that kind of stuff, unlike the other buildings. Okay. I think we hear you.
Okay. Hopefully it was helpful for you.
Yeah.
Thank you all very much.
A lot to think about. Yep.
Great. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next.
Tony, we have Stephen from the Harbor Board for this issue.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry about that. Is the applicant still with us? Yes.
I am. Yep.
Just brought him in.
Steve, you're muted right now.
Does he need to hit *6?
Steve, can you hit *6 to unmute yourself?
Sorry about that. This is Stephen Hines, chairperson of the Harbor Board. I'm also a resident of 1355 Edgewood Road, and certainly familiar with Edgewood Road from many years of experience. I wanted to clarify a couple of the main points that the Harbor was very much behind and hopeful, especially when this current version was proposed by Mr. Troilo. Certainly preserving the two historic structures that were there were the major concerns on our list of concerns. But in terms of adding buildings to the site helps the density of the village, which is something that we have always considered valuable in terms of establishing a space in the township that has that kind of relationship of buildings to one another. I would say that there was discussion about the number of units, and I believe that the consensus was that there be maybe a couple fewer, both for parking density and for the massing of the buildings. I believe that having a couple of twins, similar to what the Doherty House was, would be a way to treat those buildings and give them a certain ability to be defined as structures that, in terms of scale and of development of finishes and fenestration, et cetera, architectural elements, it's something that makes it more than just a group of row homes, which there's really no precedent for in the village. So in terms of planning those things against the road, in terms of the relationship to the road, was something that was found highly desirable, and we commended Mr. Troilo on making those moves and certainly utilizing the existing buildings to that. I did want to mention the fact that the T&D overlay, I believe, allows for 14 additional units on that. Oh, maybe it's 12, but I think that should be read into your minutes and referred to, as well as the latest minutes from the one where, not the latest one, but I think it was the one from February that we had the meeting with Mr. Troilo, where a lot of this was discussed and could be just given to you for background information about how we hope to approach it. Certainly appreciate your thoughts. And in terms of the one thing I would just have to say, I think was discussed, and I believe it was Mr. Rainier actually pointed out, having a pass-through parking lot was a little problematic in terms of cut-off type of traffic that might take advantage of going through the parking lot, similar to what the conditions are sometimes at the chapel. So with that in mind, I appreciate the opportunity to address you on these elements, and hopefully we can all proceed together. And I'm sure that Mr. Troilo will be back with us, and we can deal with a few of those. So thank you, TC, for your participation. Yes.
Steve, before you go, this is Adrian Costello. I just, I'm sort of new to some of this architectural stuff, and like a question was asked earlier that apparently it's not an approach that I don't know if it's your group or someone doesn't support. Can you help me understand what's the rationale for not trying to not move that structure to a different place on the property?
I believe that had the proposal been made and had a reasonable expectation for continuity and structural integrity been proposed, and maybe even making it cost effective, that was the biggest problem. I mean, moving a stone structure is a big deal. Right. Moving the wood structure might have created some problems, but those were the considerations that had been discussed before. And I believe that at this point, Mr. Troilo's way of proceeding seems to be the most reasonable and cost effective.
Okay. Yeah. I was just wondering, because I don't know if you listened to our discussion. It was we're just talking about the traffic and pedestrian impact with what's being proposed. And obviously, we all know that structure right there on the road does create some visual issues when you're trying to turn off of Edgewood onto Yardley Langhorne Road. That's all.
I certainly understand that. In fact, that's one of the things that were proposed actually by a member of HARB, reallocation of driving lanes and an expansion of driving lanes in that location. And I think we were put completely in the position that to the understanding that it was going to be very, very costly to do that kind of thing. So that's what led to these other discussions. And I think that the way Mr. Troilus has responded is very reasonable. Thank you.
Okay. All right. No problem. Like I said, I'm just trying to educate myself more than anything.
Thank you for your comments. Does anybody else have any questions for Steve Hines? Okay. Steve, thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve.
And thank you. Good night.
Before we have the applicant leave us, is there anyone else in waiting to speak in public comment?
No further public comment.
Thank you. Ed, I think we're at this point, we're done.
We're good. I have to stay, but CT can go.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Thanks, guys, for the input, though.
Problem.
Okay, so our next item on our agenda is another informal sketch plan, this time of Bucks County Smiles, located at 1648 Dobry Road at Oxford Valley Road.
Right. Again, I'm here tonight with Dr. Faust, who is the owner. He's a local dentist in Yardley, owner of Bucks County Smiles, and Justin Gennady, who I see on the screen. He is the project engineer that submitted the sketch, which you guys all have. Perhaps as, again, a little bit of context and background, and now that I see Dr. Faust joining us. This parcel, and again, I'm probably going to limit it to probably Jim and Tony, at least those guys with more background and experience on township stuff would know of this parcel, which is located at the corner of Dobry and Oxford Valley Road. It's owned by the Madek estate. It has, over the years in my tenure, has been the subject of a small retail strip center, a freestanding daycare use, a multi-story medical office building, and at least those three I'm directly familiar with, and none of which were able to get off the ground. The simple reason for that is the site is probably the subject of as many natural resources as the township ordinance can possibly regulate. It's got the trifecta of a stream, wetland, woods, you name it, they have it. And without getting too technical, when you apply all those different natural resource standards and the buffers that are required adjacent to them, you're left with not much. I know the family at one point a number of years back started to engage the township in conversation about the possible acquisition of the property by the township for open space, but that apparently did not get very far either. So at least in my knowledge, there's been at least 4 different overtures to try to sort out what could be done here. In the interim, Caddis has now developed a property across Dobry Road, which is now open. And the property behind this is being developed now as an age-qualified community by DeLuca. So looks like Justin has now put on the screen. I think what you can, and I'll have Justin describe a little bit about the site, and then perhaps we can have Dr. Faust tell all of us a little bit about his practice and what appeals to him about this particular site for the potential relocation of his office as depicted on Justin's plan. But Justin, why don't you talk a little bit about the site first?
Sure. And I think Mr. Majewski, I think you're sharing a screen right now. Can I take control? Is that all right? All right.
Jim's muted, but he doesn't care.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm Justin Giannotti with Dynamic Engineering. Just on the screen in front of you right now is just an aerial exhibit of the property. The property is labeled as property in question right here. The thick white line is the property. Ed already mentioned this is the new Caddis facility that was just recently constructed and opened. And the property behind us over here is just recently started construction for 78 active adult housing. Switching over, one thing I want to talk about this property before we get into it is this property was originally a lot bigger. Back in the late 90s, they actually realigned Oxford Valley Road and took a portion of their front yards. This property did have about 50 feet or so before the street. And you can see right now that property is right up on the right of way. That building's right up on the right of way of Oxford Valley Road. So Ed already alluded to the fact that this property is riddled with natural resources. There is a drainage ditch which bisects the two properties, and a small amount of wetlands in the back, which we are in the process of getting analyzed and delineated. But the most overbearing right now, per your ordinance, is the woodlands and trees on site. So switching over now to the sketch plan that's in front of you. Oxford Valley Road has a 100-foot building setback off of the right of way. So by the time you apply the right of way of Oxford Valley Road, or the setback from Oxford Valley Road, the setback from Dobry Road, which is another 50 feet, and the 75-foot side yards, and apply the natural resources, you're left what is officially a unbuildable site. I mean, we are proposing a 8,000 square foot. It's between 8 and 10,000 square foot. We're still working on architecturals. This is just a very high level concept plan here. Medical office building with 54 parking spaces. Based on orientation, we're trying to keep it as confined to the building envelope as possible, but again, trying to preserve natural resources. The building right now, as you can see, it is set no further than where we're proposing the parking lot, but the parking lot's going to be in front of the building, and the building set back to try to maintain that distance off of the right of way. Just flipping through here, that's just the same sketch without the aerial background, and this just shows you the orientation of all the trees that are on site and the existing building as it is today. So again, once you apply your natural resource standards and your site capacity calculations, you're left with what is essentially a lot you can't develop without zoning relief. But as you see it tonight, I think this is a very non-aggressive development of this property. Obviously, we're trying to preserve as much natural resources as possible. And I think it's a good fit given the recent development and the recent improvements to Dobry Road. I think that's it. I think, Ed, I don't know if you want to turn it over to Dr. Faust just to give a little bit.
For those that may not be familiar with Dr. Faust and his practice, I think he should give us a little overview of what he does, where he does it, how long he's done it there, and why he'd like to consider relocating the practice to this spot. Doctor, can you hear us?
I think he's muted.
Doctor, do you know how
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I want to say thank you for the opportunity to present this as a possibility for my practice. I have been in practice here in Yardley since 1988. I started on River Road with Dr. Howard Hoppenwasser. Within a year's time, we moved to our present location here on 680 Heacock Road across from the McCaffrey Supermarket. And our practice has steadily grown over the last 30 years to the point now that with 5 doctors working in the practice, we have run out of space. We've expanded our space 3 times within the building that we're in, and we've got no more room to go. And we're needing a bigger space and wanting to, have our own space as opposed to be part of an existing medical building with other practices in it. It gives us an opportunity to grow further than we are now. And we are a general practice. As I said, we're 5 doctors, staff of 35 now, and still growing. The practice is not limited to just kind of fill and drill dentistry anymore. We do a lot of cosmetic and rehabilitative dentistry. We do implant dentistry. We do sleep dentistry as far as sleep apnea appliances and all kinds of cosmetic facial treatments as well. So the plan is to continue to grow and have more expertise in different divisions of dentistry itself, so that we could provide service for the community like we have over the last 33 years.
As part of the plan that Justin submitted, which I presume the Planning Commission has, Justin tried to highlight, at least at this early high level, a couple of the zoning issues that we would have to confront if we move forward. So we're not expecting you to comment necessarily about those, but we would like to get, much like the last applicant, like to get your sense as to whether or not you think this is an appropriate, reasonable use for this site, given all its limitations. I know Jim Majewski and I had a brief conversation Thursday about it, and Jim's had the same level of background and experience I have in looking at all the other proposals that were far more intense than this one is. But that is the threshold question for us, is do you think there's enough here that you think it deserves a further evaluation and going to the next step? So that's where we're at.
Yep. I'll take a swing at this. I mean, I think that, without commenting on any of the zoning issues, just from, how does it fit in the surrounding area? I think it makes sense there, especially with all the development going on there with Caddis and with the age-restricted community behind it, and in particular with the development, the rebuilding of Dobry Road. Had that not occurred, or was that not occurring now, this would be a terrible idea at that location. But I think all of those things together, it makes sense that that property's been, as you've noted, had a lot of proposals to it. I don't know if it's occupied now. I'm assuming it's not. I don't think it doesn't look occupied. Right. And you're right, the road was reconfigured probably, I'm thinking it was the mid-90s, 95 or so. The road was moved. It used to be further away from the building. The idea makes a lot of sense at that location, assuming the zoning issues can be overcome, at least from my perspective.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd say from my perspective, to just add to that, it seems, I mean, based on what you want to do, it's real consistent with the office park right next to it, and it would support the residences behind it, right?
Yeah.
Guys, I know that the zoning calls for 54 parking spaces, and that's why you have that number in there. From a practical standpoint, do you believe that 54 spaces are warranted for the nature of the business?
We can look into that. You're right. I mean, this is fairly aggressive for a dental office, but probably in the range of 30 to 40 would probably work just as well. But that's something we can evaluate as well.
Doctor, do you need 55 spaces on a daily basis? I know you mentioned the number of staff and all that. That's not all at one time, though, is it?
Right now, it's not. And I don't know that we'd have that many working at the same time in that building as well. 55 seems like a lot. I would say 30 would definitely not be enough. So somewhere in between there.
Let me ask you all a question, which I have not asked either Dr. Faust or Justin before. I just find it unsettling to look at all the parking in the front of the building. Would anybody mind if we flipped it? I know it might trigger relief from the zoning ordinance about you can't have the building within 50 feet, but I think the streetscape would be so much more appealing if the building was in front and the parking was in the back. Does that trouble anybody?
Just to provide some clarity to that, Ed, we're already requesting a setback variance for the 100 foot. So it would just be moving it up about 50 feet closer.
Yeah, it just looks so unappealing with all the sea of parking out front.
Can you bring the sketch plan back up?
Yes, sir. Hold on.
And one thing that should be noted, that building sits down probably about 5 or 6 feet lower than the bike path in the road. There's actually a slope easement from PennDOT from when they built that. So that parking area actually be sitting down probably 5 to 6 feet, I believe.
Would that require a retaining wall?
It could. Yeah, we haven't done any grading yet, and we still have limited survey. But yeah, it could require a retaining wall if we can't regrade the site. Again, we could grade. We have plenty of room to grade, but we're trying to preserve as much woodlands as possible.
So you're saying, Jim, you wouldn't necessarily see the parking?
It wouldn't be as in your face like you're thinking that, why have that sea of parking right up front, which I agree with you on that. So I think that's something maybe to take a look at it.
Okay.
But my recollection is the house sits way down.
Okay.
There's no sidewalk shown along Dobry Road.
There's the existing sidewalk is there. The asphalt trail does continue through.
Along Oxford Valley. Andy's asking about Dobry, Justin.
Oh, okay. Along Dobry. So yeah, we have Dobry is, if you remember, we're proposing a sidewalk extension that was deferred. It's for the Caddis site. It's going to be installed as part of the DeLucas Scanlon subdivision that's going to be constructed. And that sidewalk does continue down along Dobry Road. It's already
so there will be sidewalk along both Oxford Valley and Dobry on both sides.
Correct.
Okay.
Dobry one side, correct.
Right. On our side.
Yes.
Right.
And that's already been designed for with Dobry Road.
Yep. So do I take it everybody's agreed we could at least look at an option of moving the building closer and moving the parking to the back?
Yeah. I mean, for me personally, just kind of get the visuals sort of help me see.
Yeah, agreed. Okay.
I mean, I would think that the woodland preservation, provided you're still meeting that number for woodland preservation, then that would be, I think if you exceeded the woodland preservation number, that might be a deal breaker.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
And one thing to note, if they do reduce the parking a little bit, because our ordinance calls for one space for every 150 square feet of office, which is 54 spaces. I think if you go by the ITE standards for parking, which are a little more updated, I think the number is lower. It'd probably come in somewhere around 40 spaces. And then Dr. Faust can just confirm like where his practice currently is. How many spaces does he think he really uses to come up with a number that works for everybody?
Okay.
Okay. Well, it sounds like there's enough sentiment that we can at least take the next baby step and take a closer look at this and see what we come up with.
There was no dumpster or trash location shown on the plan. There's no loading area. Anything over 6,000 square feet is going to require a loading area. I don't know that would you be asking for a variance for that?
Still to be looked into. Again, I mean, we could certainly show a dumpster. There's a space available for that.
Yeah.
But I'll talk to Doctor about the requirements for loading and see if it's necessary, if we should pursue the variance.
Have you done a truck turning analysis on that driveway coming around there?
Which driveway, Andy? Coming in and turning here?
Yeah.
For a fire truck?
Yeah. Can they make that turn?
We'll verify it that they can. Again, I think flipping the layout, putting the building towards the front could help with that as well.
Agreed.
Any other comments?
Okay, good. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Before you take off, is there any public
Oh,
comment
I'm
on
sorry.
this?
I'm sorry.
No public comment.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, guys. Thank you.
Good night.
Next item is any other business that anyone might have? Anybody have any other business?
Nope.
Take it there's none. Okay. Jim, when's our next meeting?
Next Monday, April 12th.
Okay. And is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Move to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And we are adjourned.
All right.
Good night.
Thank you, everybody.